And Sunshine, excellent. We're going to record this to help us disseminate for people who couldn't make it today. But since it's a webinar, it'll only be our four faces that folks see. So if you are listening on your computer and watching, don't be alarmed. You are not being recorded. Um, so thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. And making time for us in your schedule. We are the team from ALJP Consulting, and we are here today to talk a little bit about our partnership with Theater Bay Area in the executive director search and organizational assessment that we've been conducting with them. And this session, just to start off this session, before we jump into introductions, which we will get to in just a moment, I just want to share why we're gathered here today. And we're really gathered here today to share our process, our methodology, and excitement about this search with the Bay Area community. We are now we're almost done with our organizational assessment, and we'll be moving into the executive search within the next month for this position. So really using this as an opportunity to let you all into our process and know what to expect in the coming months as we begin this search for the executive director. To share information about how you can get involved, either as an interested community member or a potential applicant. So hopefully this gives you an opportunity to hear about us and then also ask us questions. The structure of today is that we'll present for about 30 to 45 minutes, and then we will open it up to a Q&A session, and you can use the Q&A function on your screen to ask any questions. Feel free to start dropping questions in there as we're going and as those questions come to you, and we'll answer them during the Q&A session. Another purpose for our gathering here today is to really show you that our search will be guided by values of transparency and openness, and to really invite people to talk back to us as we're conducting this search. We want to hear from you, we want to hear from the community, and make sure that the community really has a stake and an involvement as we find this really important role for the entire Bay Area. And then finally, just to answer any questions you may have about our process, about what to expect, anything like that. So again, we'll get to that in the Q&A section, but that's a few reasons why we gathered you all here today. So now to turn it over to some introductions, I will turn it to Jocelyn to talk a little bit about herself.
Thanks, Leandro. Hey, everybody, I'm Joan Prince. I'm a principal and co-founder with ALJP Consulting. I'm a native of Chicago. I went to school at Northwestern University and I teach there. I've worked at theaters across the country as an artist. I'm a dramaturg. I've also worked as an administrator in a number of capacities in education departments and artistic departments. I have some work in politics under my belt. I've worked on a few presidential campaigns and I'm a frequent volunteer with the Democratic Party. So that is a little bit about me, and I'll turn it over to Michael to introduce himself.
Hi, friends. Glad to be here. I'm an associate with ALJP on this project. Very excited to be here. My background mostly is in theater. I have run a couple of theaters and worked as a director, choreographer, and a published playwright for many, many theaters, mostly in the DC area where I grew up. But I've also taught at a number of different universities in the theater and the dance world, as I spent many of my years as a dancer. I have done a lot of things in theater, including fundraising. I have a certificate in fundraising, and certainly one of the things I have as a specialty is being able to turn around organizations. So I'm happy to be here. I'm a dad of a beautiful 20-year-old Vietnamese child and who's now in college studying marine biology. And I'm also an Idris Elba stalker, just in case anyone wanted to know that. I'll turn it over to Al.
I like the Idris Elba piece. That's incredible. That's lovely. Thank you, Michael, for that. Hi, everyone. My name is Al Hartley. I am a co-founder and principal at ALJP Consulting. I most recently was the managing director at the Word Center for the Performing Arts at Northwestern University for the past 2.5 years, where I also taught. But now am full-time as a principal and consultant with ALJP, and currently based in Atlanta, Georgia. Some of the institutions I've worked at in the past have mainly been around administration. I graduated from Yale School of Drama with a degree in theater management, and have worked at a number of theaters across the country, including the Gino Neal Theater Center, Yale Rep, the Guthrie, Cleveland Playhouse, Steppenwolf, and have also taught and or lectured at a number of universities across the country. I also, at least in my spare time, am very passionate about college football. So this season is very much in line with my love and interest outside of theater. And then also I'm a great lover of podcasts. And so I've really been listening to Throughline from NPR. So that's been one of my favorite ones that I've been listening to lately. But really thrilled to be working with Theater Bay Area and to be on this project. And I'm going to turn it over to Leandro to introduce himself.
Awesome. Thanks, Al. So my name is Leandro Zanetti. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm a senior consultant with ALJP Consulting. I've been with the company for since the beginning of 2020, so about almost 2 years now. And I'm a Brazilian-American creative producer focused on producing work by and for BIPOC folks who identify as queer and trans people of color. I co-founded a organization called Codify Art, which is based in Brooklyn, which is a multidisciplinary artist collective also amplifying work by queer and trans people of color. I am currently residing in Atlanta. I moved here just about 5 days ago, so I'm a new Atlantean. Before that, I was in New York, and before that, I was in New Haven, where I got my MFA in theater management from Yale University. Before I went to grad school, I worked at places like the Public Theater. I did a fellowship at Steppenwolf Theater in Chicago. And then I also worked for Capacity Interactive, which is a marketing consulting company based in New York. So I'm really excited to be partnering with Theater Bay Area on this search, and really excited to share this information with you all today. Thanks so much for joining us. And now I will pass it over to JP to talk a little bit about us as a company.
Thanks, Leandro. So some things to know about us is that we're very interested in art, and we're very interested in equity and how those things work together. We are all artists. We're dramaturgs, playwrights, creative producers, choreographers. So we're very interested in the artistic ecosystem. But we're also very interested in equity. And we wanted to start a search and planning firm that put anti-racist practices, equity, diversity, and inclusion at the center and at the heart of the way that we do business, our methodology, our thought process, and the way that we work. And so we're trying to create a diverse and inclusive environment for artists, administrators, and patrons in a holistic way. So we're a mission-driven firm. Some of our inspirations, as you'll see on our next slide, come from a variety of different places. We draw inspiration from Adrienne Maree Brown's work with emergent strategies. We are all very steeped in the training that is provided by Art Equity, Carmen Morgan's work. And so these are just some of the things that we're kind of inspired by and that we think about as we're doing this work. I'm going to pass it on to Al to talk about our values.
Thanks, Jocelyn. So, more than anything, with organizations, we're also guided by, what we believe and want to live each and every single day at ALJP. And I want to group these together a little bit just to talk you all through them. The first two in particular are so near and dear to, as Jocelyn explained, why we started this firm, looking towards anti-racism, or with a lens of anti-racism, as well as equity, diversity, and inclusion. That ultimately we really believe that, race has such a central piece in terms of our structures and modes of operation within the United States. And that really pushing back against racism and actively combating racism, helps to provide a frame and an analysis for liberating other marginalized communities or marginalized communities and oppression. And so we really take that near and dear to our hearts and into our practice as a whole. That also dovetails into equity, diversity, and inclusion. That ultimately, we believe these three pieces are very active with one another. That ultimately, also looking at how can we be inclusive and push for equity in every parts of our process, both internally within ALJP, as well as working with our clients and partners. Community and collaboration, something that we are really steeped in as well, of course, is the theater, but a hallmark of that being about collaboration and really building a community with each client that we work with. Wanting to make sure that, at least on our end, we don't always have the right answers, so to speak, but instead we know that the group and the collective have the right answers. And so really being able to focus on collaboration as a centerpiece of who we are as well. Access and transparency. Another reason in particular that Jocelyn and I wanted to start a search firm and a planning firm was also to try to open up how processes like this work, and be able to be as transparent as we are able to be, around the process and around how we are doing within the process and what milestones we are working to and tracking towards. And finally, care, love, and compassion. That ultimately, in particular when it comes to search, but also really when it comes to planning, as much as we can do to really hold that each person, each human being, has a way in which that they are intersecting and bringing themselves to a search process and to us at ALJP. And we want to make sure that just as much as we are giving to our clients, we also want to have a compassionate and caring process, for our candidates and through our planning processes as well. Next, I'll talk a little bit about our methodology in terms of how we work and the ways, that we pursue our work. The first piece is power sharing. Is that recognizing within each process, within each organization, there are power dynamics that exist. There are hierarchies that are inevitable, within an organization. And so every time that we approach a project, we always think about who perhaps are we not hearing from? How can we share power that may usually be concentrated in a person or a group of people and really spread that out within the organization so that everyone can feel heard, and also providing opportunities for power to shift within various dynamics within the organization. That we are a facilitator and a reflector, which ties nicely also into our reflexive assessment. That ultimately we really see ourselves as guides, that we're not coming in with exact answers and exact structures about how things should be done and could be done. But instead, we're really able to be a container and be a third party to help reflect the values back of the organization, and also what we hear in our process as we're listening and responding to both the clients and partners, as well as those stakeholders that we engage. Creative metrics, that ultimately we really think that anything can be measured, and that we want to be useful and innovative in terms of what questions organizations wish to ask and how we can bring in data in order for those questions to be answered. So, really thinking about what are things that we can measure, yes, financially and organizationally, but also looking artistically, programmatically to determine impact. Then we do a 360 feedback. We want to hear from all aspects of the organization: board, staff, leadership, artists, the community. We really want to look at from a holistic perspective. And then finally, on the last piece, of purposeful gathering. We're really guided by the ideas of Priya Parker, and really determining why we are gathering and what is the reasoning that we need to come together in order to solve something, process something. So just as Leandro did at the top of this meeting, we're really being able to talk about and articulate what are we here for and why. And so that always guides how we can structure our meetings, how we think about the agenda for our meetings, and intersecting with our clients in particular. So from what our values are and how we do it, I'm going to turn it back over to Leandro to talk a little bit about some of the partners that we've worked with and the placements that we've made recently.
Excellent. Thank you, Al and Jocelyn, for telling us a little bit about ALJP. I'm always re-inspired whenever you all talk about why we do this. So thanks for that. Some current and past partners that we've worked with, are currently working with, include Marin Theater Company, where we did the managing director search, where we placed Meredith Suttles. We're currently in the midst of the executive director search for American Repertory Theater at Harvard University. We're also in the midst of the artistic director search for New York Theater Workshop. We recently completed a search for Remy Bumpo, where we found the next artistic director for them, and Remy Bumpo is a theater in Chicago. And then for Oregon Shakespeare Festival, we did a search for the Director of Marketing and Communications, as well as Director of IDEA, Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Access. We've partnered with Trinity Rep on a producing director search. We've done some strategic planning with Pivot Arts. We did some anti-racism action planning with Dobama Theater in Cleveland. And we've done some community building work with Waterwell, which is an education and theater organization in New York. And one that's actually not listed in here, but I'm going to say it anyway, is we're actually doing the search for the managing director of Aurora. So somebody right in your very own community is another search that we're currently engaged in. So also working with some folks, some more folks over in the Bay Area. And for a full list of folks who we've worked with, you can visit our website at aljpconsulting.com. And at the top, you can see current and past partners. You'll be able to navigate to that page, or you can just follow that URL that's at the bottom of your screen right now. So just to talk a little bit about some recent placements that we've done in the searches I just mentioned. As I mentioned, Meredith Suttles, the managing director of Marin Theater Company, who is now an active member of your community and someone who we're really excited about in a leadership role in the Bay Area. Anya Muse, we placed as the Director of Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Access at Oregon Shakespeare Festival. And she actually came from Marin County. She worked in government in Marin County in their diversity office. So she also has a connection to the Bay Area. And then we placed Marty Lyons as the artistic director of Remy Bumpo Theater Company. So that's just a little bit about, who we've worked with in the past and some folks who we have placed. And now I'll turn it over to Michael to talk a little bit about, where are we in this process and what have we done so far? Michael?
Such a great company. It's just so great to be part of it and to be on certain projects with you all. Some of the smartest people I know. So our process, it's pretty exhaustive in a good way, meaning that we're very thorough about the work that we do and want to make sure we're digging in to every nook and cranny and finding out all the details we can find out about the organization, about the area and the region, so that we can really help out and find the best fit for you all. So everything starts with a proposal and a planning process that's in partnership with TBA. And once we get that done, we have agreed to in our proposal to do not only the search for the new executive director, but also an organization assessment. And so one of the things we do first is to gather as many documents as we can find. So that includes everything from the strategic plan to bios of board members, to donor information, links to old surveys, personnel policies, program lists, past audits, management letters from the audits, organizational charts, and all of that will inform some of the work we put in our organizational assessment. And then we do a bunch of internal stakeholder interviews. That's mostly with the staff and the board, and those are numerous. And we do several of those to get a lot of information. We take lots and lots of notes. From there, we start our external focus groups. And as I'm looking at some of the names of the participants today, I recognize a bunch. I think many of you have been there. We started with large budget member theater orgs, and then we went to small budget orgs, BIPOC theater companies, and then BIPOC individuals. and recently finished up individual members and the Theater Services Committee. Again, all that information will be compiled, and we'll go through all that together and create an organizational assessment for the company. And then that will hopefully help us to inform the job description and what we look for when we're trying to find our Theater Bay Area's next executive director. And then next up, a little bit about our timeline. We're still in the midst of completing the stakeholder calls, and we will be delivering the organizational assessment hopefully before the month is out or beginning of next month. And then next month, we hope to get the job posting out and start our recruitment process and the first and second screening interviews. And then hopefully in December, we'll get our bias awareness trainings for the interviewers, those folks that will be asking the questions of the interviewees. And then in January and February, candidate presentations to the search committee, some internal interviews, and then the search committee deliberations, offer and hire. So hopefully we can deliver a shiny brand new executive director for TBA by February.
Excellent. Thanks, Michael. And just to talk a little bit, I'm just going to jump in here just to talk a little bit about our bias awareness training. We built that into our process really to talk about how we see bias show up in searches, but also talk about white supremacy characteristics that we've seen shown up in searches, and to inform folks what questions also not to ask, what is not legal to ask, and then to hold a question workshop, really to protect our candidates as they're going through this process, to make sure that the questions that we're asking are appropriate and are as impartial as we can be. We purposefully don't call it a anti-bias training, because we recognize and acknowledge that bias is something that all of us hold and not something that we can always control. You know, we have unconscious biases, but hopefully by offering that to anybody who's interfacing with candidates, we hope to provide a safer and more equitable process as we're evaluating and talking to candidates. So that's just a little bit about that bias awareness training for y'all to have as well. And so I'll take this slide about search committee. So we are currently in the process of compiling and confirming the search committee. The search committee for this position will include representation from the board, staff, and other key stakeholders, including the community. One thing that we really advocate for and really insist on is having a search committee that is representative of the different stakeholder groups for the organization. So we really push organizations, and we will continue to work with Theater Bay Area to make sure that that search committee is incredibly diverse, and diverse in terms of race, gender, position within the organization. So making sure that people have we have representation from all levels within the organization, board members who represent different constituencies of the stakeholders, and then also having a search committee that has community representation, because especially for this position that is such a field-wide impact, the hire for this will have a field-wide impact in the Bay Area. We really think it's important to have those community members present in this process. And so if you have any recommendations for folks who you think would be excellent on that search committee and who you think would have great ideas about and a great way of analyzing and assessing candidates, please send them along to us. We will we'll provide an email for you at the end of this presentation that just details how to get in touch with us, and we'll welcome any sort of feedback there. And then once we have everybody confirmed on the committee, we'll be transparent about that. We really want people to know who's on the committee, not so that they can be bombarded with questions or so that people can try to talk to them about the search, but so that folks know who's making this decision and who's recommending this to the board. Because ultimately in our process, what will happen is the search committee will make a decision, will make a recommendation to the board of directors at Theater Bay Area, and then the board at Theater Bay Area will confirm that recommendation and have discussion around that recommendation. So again, really making sure that as we're recommending to the board, we are recommending with the voices of as many people as we can possibly include on that search committee. The search committee will fall somewhere between 7 and 9 people, just to keep it a manageable size, so that we can really have in-depth, deep conversations about, what are we assessing? What are we looking for? What's really important to us? And keeping it an odd number so that we can't have a tie, really making sure that we don't put ourselves in the position where we need a tiebreaker of any kind. So again, please share suggestions for folks who you think would be really excellent for this. And that's a little bit about our search committee, and we'll share who those folks are as soon as we know. And I will turn it to Al to talk about your role, the role of the community in this process.
Thanks, Leandro. Yes, as Leandro mentioned, and as I think you all may have gathered, is that a piece of our collaborative nature is really being able to involve the community and as many members of the community as possible. So there's a number of ways that you can really intersect with us. One is to nominate. We will create and have a nomination form of ideas of folks within the community and perhaps outside of the community as well, for both the position as well as for the search committee. So really important that that we have a strong, presence from folks around people that we should be reaching out to, either for nominations or for the role itself. It's so critical as we're moving forward with the recruitment process and our own internal process with ALJP. Also, we want to hear your feedback. We would love to hear your thoughts about the needs of the Bay Area theater community. We were so, fortunate to be able to listen to so many different constituents, in particular last week. And we want to keep hearing more. It is the way in which we are learning more about the ecology out in the Bay Area, and our commitment to learning more and being able to represent, the ecology as best as we can. And so the way that we do that is being able to take in feedback. In addition, we want to also solicit feedback from the community about potential changes programmatically. What are things, again, that go back to what you all need, that help to work and align with Theater Bay Area, as we're seeking its executive director and defining its future steps. And then, of course, the final piece is that you can apply for the position itself. We will have an open application. We also have an email where, you can submit questions and feedback to us anytime, whether that is feedback itself or questions about the position and the search. So ultimately, if you believe and really want to be the helm, and drive the direction of Theater Bay Area into its next chapter, would be really wonderful to hear from you all, and would be thrilled to be able to speak with any potential applicants as well. And so with that, want to go to the next slide, and as I mentioned in my, or on the chat, is really thinking about if there's, if you all have questions about our process, about us, as individuals or as a company, this is really a moment where we want to engage and be able to hear from you all as well. So of course we want, again, if you do have questions, ideas, and nominations, there is the Theater Bay ED search at aljp.com email that you can contact. But also want to provide an opportunity if folks wish to put in a question in the Q&A for us to be able to answer, and talk a little bit about our process, a little bit more about who we are, and plans for Theater Bay or our plans for Theater Bay Area. Again, drop them in the chat, drop them in the Q&A, so that we can hear from you. So we don't have any quite yet, but we'll give folks a second. And of course, I'm also happy to jump in to try to spark a question out of my colleagues, to answer about our process and the way that we approach things. Let's see, we've got a question from Vaughn. answer or asking, will ALJP also look for a replacement for Dale Albright? The departure of both Brad and Dale amounts to a gigantic loss for TBA and the Bay Area theater community. Anybody want to jump in on that question? Thank you, Vaughn.
Yeah, thanks, Vaughn. I can jump in now. So at this time, we're not finding the replacement for Dale. Part of the work that we're doing with TBA, though, is to really assess what the right organizational structure is for them. So part of our assessment work will be to offer up some different ways that other service organizations around the country are structured, what positions they might have, and think about, as we really figure out what is the future of Theater Bay Area, particularly in the first 1 to 2 years as this executive director is getting acclimated into the environment. Looking at what are our priorities for that time, and then how can we appropriately structure our staff to make sure that we're best poised to do those things within that 1 to 2 year time. So as of right now, we're only doing the search for Brad's replacement. We're not doing the one for Dale, but we'll be assessing sort of what that position should be, wants to be, and how it intersects with the organization.
Thanks for that, Leandro. And again, Vaughn, really appreciate the question. I hope that's helpful. It helps to answer that.
I have a question that other folks can ask. How long will this take? Like, when do we think that this process will, if I apply, when do I think that the decision will be made?
That's a great piece and a great question. Every time we do a search in particular, we certainly understand that there are ways in which the environment currently has really shifted how the timeline frankly has worked for a search, because of the environment, because of the pandemic in particular. We're also finding that searches are taking some time in its essence too, but really looking at early 2022 in terms of having a decision there. We really want to take the rest of the year to do recruitment on our end, to really be able to also talk to folks and have an interview process through ALJP in order to bring a number of candidates to the search committee, either by the end of this year or just at the top of January. So looking really at early 2022 for that particular decision.
Thanks, Al. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so that we can all see each other properly.
That would be great.
There you go.
I think another question that I could throw out there for the group as well is, what are ways in which, we try on our end to recruit folks, and think about, how we approach potential candidates, where we might mine, or the different ways that we try to mine and find candidates.
I feel like I'm talking a lot, but I can take this one too. We recruit in a lot of different ways. So we will, once we have the job description posted, we will plaster it all across social media, on our social media, as well as into spaces that are affinity spaces for folks, really making sure that different communities are getting access to the job description, making sure that they're seeing it in their feeds, and really using the power of things like groups on Facebook to help spread the word to communities that may not already be tuned in. So that's one way that we'll recruit. We'll also reach out to industry leaders across the organization, across the country, to see who are folks who we may not know. We have an extensive database of folks and network between all of us, and then also all of our associates, all of our other associates at ALJP. We have a really extensive network that is, I would say, very diverse. And so we'll also use the power of our own networks to get recommendations, as well as reaching out to individual people to come join TBA. And that'll really be guided by what the job description is, right? We base our job descriptions on competencies, really thinking about what are the skills that you need to be successful in this job, so that we can get away from things of like, oh, I really liked this person, or like, all of those really subjective ways that bias can show up in searches. And so we'll cast a very wide net and ask for folks. And we'll be looking for folks both within the Bay Area and outside, knowing that there are pros and cons to both, and allowing us to really take a holistic look at what is best for Theater Bay Area right now, and who is perhaps the best the best candidate. Other ways that we'll recruit is we use LinkedIn. There's a recruiter tool within LinkedIn that'll help us uncover even more talent across the country, and really making sure that people are seeing the job description. We do a lot of individual outreach. We have conversations with folks who we think would be excellent for the position, to tell them about what the opportunities are here and how excited we are about the future of Theater Bay Area. So those are some of the different ways that we'll recruit. But I'll welcome anyone else to pick up anything I missed.
No, I think you covered it pretty well, Leandro.
I was gonna say that was a good overview, Leandro. I do want to point to this question we also have about, will there be any in-person aspect of the search process, or is this all virtual?
I think that question is to be determined. I think that as the COVID pandemic rages on and things continue to be in flux as far as protocols for safety, we'll have to kind of evaluate it as we go. I think it would be great if we could have in-person interviews and in-person visits, but we'll see if people, feel comfortable with that when the time comes, if that's practical. We're prepared to do it all virtually. We've done searches that have been all virtual that have been fine, but we prefer some in person if possible.
And I would say the other point of consideration that we have there is inclusion, right? As one of our core values, knowing that there are folks who are immunocompromised, who have disabilities, who for them, especially for them, the pandemic is over. The pandemic isn't over for anybody, but especially for those folks who have to be even more careful than the rest of us. We want to make sure that we offer the same opportunities. And so thinking about that and knowing that that is on the horizon, that's one thing that we consider as we go through this search. And really not trying to make it so that some people are in person and some people are virtual, because again, that can invite a level of bias into the search that may not be, that'll harm some folks. So we really try to make it as consistent and even across all of the interviews as possible. And that's what we'll be basing our decision on whether this is all virtual or some parts of it are in person. We also acknowledge that it is incredibly difficult for someone to make a decision about a job where they've never visited, right? And so especially if somebody is from outside the Bay Area, we'll definitely find a way for them to visit the Bay Area before they accept the position, even if that's not during an interview process. So we really want to make sure that people have, both the organization and our candidates have all the information they need to make the best decision for them.
Excellent. Thanks for that, y'all. Really appreciate you being able to answer that particular question. We've got another one here that says, how do you measure success? Is there any turnover rate among those selected in other past organizations?
So I don't have the exact data in terms of turnover rate. Maybe Al or Jocelyn, you can if you have that data, you can jump in. But in terms of success, I mean, I think for us, success is the placement of a candidate who can thrive, who can really enact change within an organization. And part of our process after we've placed a candidate is to also do a 60-day check-in with that candidate to hear feedback from them on, what's working well, where can we intersect? Because we know that our job, though the contract ends once this person is placed, we want to continue to be a resource for them and really make sure that we can connect them to the resources that they need to succeed within the organization. So whether that means connecting them to other folks within our network or connecting them with resources that we have access to, we really try to offer support to candidates and so that they know that once they're placed in these organizations, we are and should be a source of connection for them and support. So really making sure that they know we're here for them in any way that they need once we place them. So that for me, success is somebody who can really thrive and someone who feels like it is I call it matchmaking, right? I think of it in terms of matchmaking, of how can we match this person's passion and skills and love with the needs of the organization. And if those things meet, then I think I can sleep well at night knowing we did a good job.
I want to jump in too, just to say as well that, it's also in terms of success for the candidate, but also a successful really transitioning and setting up the candidate to succeed in itself. And so that's why this organizational assessment is so key. The more the organization is able to clarify, about its intentions, about its objectives, about the goals that it's trying to meet, that's more that allows for more success or a more of a setup for success for that executive director. So this is why, the intervening months and the months that we've been working with TBA, are all leading up to ultimately not only how is the organization going to be successful in its future, but also considering how do we set up the organization or this candidate for success as well.
We have another question in
go ahead.
We have two actually, but the first one is from Michael. Michael asks, on another note, when do you think play judging will start again? I know live theater is clawing its way back, but is there any discussion on this? I know we have staff here from Theater Bay Area, so I'm hoping to turn it over and have staff answer.
Hi, everyone. Sunshine Lampton-Smith, Marketing and Communications Officer at TBA currently, she, her, hers. About the awards are currently on hiatus as we do this organizational assessment and make these big decisions about TBA. And actually, even before the search started, I know that we, during the pandemic, we're thinking about the structure of the program and how we could improve it and make it more equitable and address kind of systemic problems that people had brought up during the years. So that's been an ongoing process. Definitely, I can say we probably wouldn't restart the awards program at least until next September, because that would be a fair time to start the season again, as it used to run September through the end of August. But that's about the most up-to-date info I have right now.
Excellent. Thanks. Thank you so much, Sunshine. I also just want to add that part of our organizational assessment is to assess the programs of Theater Bay Area. In the interest of full transparency, we're looking at the very vast programming that Theater Bay Area has been providing to the Bay Area theater ecology. And really thinking about, what is the best way to serve this community in this moment. And that will involve assessing these different programs and seeing, is this what's needed right now? And everything's sort of on the table in that assessment. And so one of the things that I hope is that we can also create a TBA that is different and more relevant and more even more necessary to your day-to-day lives in terms of as theater professionals. And part of that will involve assessing the different programs the TBA does. So I'm sorry we don't have more solid information for you on that, Michael, but as soon as we make some decisions, we'll be sure to communicate those to you and to everybody in the community. Go ahead, Michael.
Thanks, Leandro. We have another question from Michael. And your name is spelled differently than mine, so I'm hoping I'm pronouncing it correctly. But Michael says, is the salary commensurate with the rents in San Francisco? This is a consideration for any candidate that doesn't live here.
I would certainly say so. One of the part of the work that we do as we're building the job description and as we're working with our clients is to look at the cost of living in the area, and also what the pay scale is for similar organizations around the country. So we'll do some research, we'll make a recommendation, but really making sure that this person has a living wage, because we know that the cost of living is very high in San Francisco, and making sure that this person, that's a part of thriving, right? Is we want people to thrive not only in their professional lives, but also in their personal lives, especially if folks are making the decision to move to a different city or state. We want to make sure that we're setting them up for success in both their non-professional lives as well as their professional lives. So that is something that we are deeply considering, and thank you for bringing that up. And we will post that job, the salary range for the position. It'll be included in our job description. It's included in every one of our job descriptions, again, based on our value of transparency.
My son wanted to study marine biology out at USF, and I was like, whoa, tuition. Anyway, any more questions, friends? This is your time with us. We have about 10 more minutes. We want to make sure we're answering any questions about the search, with any comments you may have about what you're looking for. Another comment from Michael: it sounds like we need a younger transformation candidate that is eager to hit the ground running. No ageism, but we need someone with lots of energy to cover such a large area. Thank you for that comment.
Certainly. And I see that Susie Manick raised her hand, so I'm just going to make it over to my other window. And Susie, please go ahead.
It's so nice to see you. Thanks for being here. Well, I think when we talk about what does this position have to be, it's a very complicated community, as what communities are, and we have large organizations, small organizations, community-based. Within TBA, we think about what non-union as well as unionized organizations. We have a very large geographic area that we represent, which, unlike so many other communities, is truly balkanized in that, we are not a unified Bay Area. And I think and we also are an organization that increasingly represents individual artists as well as organizations. I think it is extremely complicated, and figuring out what is the function of TBA has something that has always been, as long as I've been in the Bay Area, a profound challenge. I will say, in my own experience, that the first time, and I'm going to say this, and it sounds harsh, and I don't mean it to, because I think that Brad, and actually Brad's predecessors, Sabrina, all of them, have done really good work. But the first time that TBA has been absolutely essential has been during this period of time of the pandemic, when we both needed their clarity in organizing us for advocacy, and also their clarity in helping us at some level organize for communication. Has been, I will say that, every year I've thought, should we be paying our dues? And this has been really the time that they've really proven to be helpful. I don't think any of us just needs an organization for us to be together. I think that we needed an organization that moves us toward collective action. And I think that's a particular challenge in this community, because we are not a collective. I don't know if anybody else wants to respond to that, but I think this is an organization that's, I've lived in Chicago, where Chicago theater was very organized, in Philadelphia, where the greater Philadelphia arts community was very organized. This is very different in my experience.
Thank you so much for that, Susie. I think that, that really resonates with me and the work that we've been doing and the listening that we've been doing for from the various constituencies. And that's part of the work that we're doing with this organizational assessment. You know, as you mentioned, and this is something that's been echoed in other rooms as well, of having of Theater Bay Area being especially necessary and really proving the necessity of Theater Bay Area during this time. And that really is an opportunity for Theater Bay Area to capitalize on, you know, exactly what you talked about of how do we mobilize folks and how do we organize. And part of that, we think, will also come with focusing within the organization, right? And how do we focus the organization so that people know what it is we do and what it is we don't do? Because when we try to be all things to all people, we don't get good at any of it. And so part of our work is to really press Theater Bay Area as well, both on the board and staff level, to think about what's core to this organization, and not only what's core to this organization internally, but what is the need most across the Bay Area. And so I'm responding to what you're saying in terms of, I think it's a really complex question and answer, and we also want to make sure that this person who's coming in has some direction that they're following, right? That the organization themselves has to set the direction and then allow the person who enters this position to bring their passion and skills to that mission and vision and core values and direction, to really make sure that they can continue to be the organizer and the galvanizer within the community. Other folks, do you all have other things you want to respond to in terms of what Susie said? You have your thinking face on, Al, so I'm looking at you.
No, I think that's absolutely right. And you know, more than anything too, you know, the pandemic has certainly shown for theater organizations, I think across the country, you know, of what it means to really have to lead within a crisis and to be clear about vision, to be clear about direction, you know, and being able to motivate people, you know, in the middle of what has been so much loss and feelings of devastation, you know, and actual devastation during the pandemic. You know, so I think that there is something really special, you know, in this moment, despite all of the pain, where it really is focusing and understanding where our resources needed most and what are we here for. And I think the pandemic has continued to demonstrate that for not only Theater Bay Area, but I think for organizations across the country in particular. So that's my add to it as well. But Susie, I think your comments are extremely well taken, you know, in terms of how to look at the future direction of the organization, you know, and continuing that value add there.
Mm-hmm. And I would welcome other folks if people you know, watching this have other thoughts and they want to respond to this point that Susie said. Just raise your hand and I'll give you you know, webinars are weird, so I have to give you talking permission. But I'm happy to do that. I'd love to hear other community folks sort of take on what Susie said and what that is. And as we wait for anybody who wants to join that conversation, I just noticed there's another question in the chat. Which is, how will ALJP evaluate a candidate's ability to promote theater and raise money to support the community? And I asked the question, so I'm not answering this one.
Well, both Al and I come from a fundraising background. I have a certificate in fundraising, and so we kind of know what the skill sets are needed for fundraising, and so we'll add that as part of our job description, and also probably in our interview question. So we'll be able to find out what the experiences are. Al, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that's exactly right. You know, and in particular, you know, the way that we look at interviews, and the way that we look at evaluating folks is by developing competencies. You know, we really strive to define, you know, what are the essential competencies, skills, and abilities that this person needs And how can we test for them? How can we really dig into someone's background and someone's experience, in order to, not only in terms of their process and thinking, but also in terms of the results that they've produced, in their own leadership. So, overall, I agree with Michael's point of, it's really about, it not only being in the job description, but also something that we'll actively test for and really drill into when we're speaking with candidates as well.
Yeah, thank you both. And I think that question about promote theater is a really interesting one, right? Because I think that one of the things that I'm certainly interested in as we enter the interview phase of our process is looking for somebody who can talk about theater, right? Like capital T ecology theater, as opposed to, which is a different skill than talking about individual productions, right? And promoting theater as an industry as opposed to theater on the individual level. And so that's something that I'm really turning in my head as we approach these interviews is, what gets at, how can we best highlight candidates' abilities to really inspire, because promotion is about inspiration, right? And so how can, and as we're talking about increasing awareness of the Bay Area theater, how can we find somebody who can inspire folks around them by talking about the value of what theater brings to the community that isn't specific to an individual production or in an individual theater, but is about the value of the art form and the value of the business of theater for the Bay Area. Because let's be honest, I mean, yes, theater brings in, increases folks' empathy, helps folks deal with challenging questions, but it's also a great economic driver for cities. So how can you make both of those arguments as you're promoting the theater industry in the Bay Area is something that I'm really going to be looking for with candidates.
One more question from Michael. Michael had lots of questions. Great, Michael. So we need a cheerleader with management skills. I think that's probably a good way to boil it down.
Probably a good way to explain an executive director and a managing director,
Yeah.
And I want to define, that piece in particular about management skills. It's also important around how this person identifies their leadership lens and philosophy and craft. Something that the pandemic again certainly showed is that being able to keep the trains running, so to speak, and making sure the trains are on time and on the right track, is just not where we've been over the last 18 months. Instead, we've had to actively question and say, well, there is no train, there is no track. We have to actively think of a different vehicle to be able to get us to our destination. And so, it is that management skill, but really being able to look at those leadership functions and aspects about how do you establish a direction, how do you motivate people, and what's the best way to construct and design the organization in order to do that. And so this organizational assessment, again, is helpful, not only for the clarity with Theater Bay Area, but also for the clarity of intention and purpose for the leader, for this next leader as well.
Yeah, and Al always brings up this difference between management and leadership, right? And I think that is so key in this search. Is that yes, we're looking for an excellent manager who can help the organization thrive, but really I think even more than that, I think we're looking for a leader who can do all of the things that Al just mentioned in terms of inspiration. And looking at the field from, I think of leaders within individual organizations looking at things as like a 30,000 foot perspective for their organization. And I think this person is like 60,000 feet looking at all of those different organizations and seeing where are the connection points? How can we connect people who are looking for ways to collectively make action? And there are ways to do that around so many issues, around advocacy, but also around equity, diversity, and inclusion, also around the different funders that are in the Bay Area that might be able to be connected with organizations through Theater Bay Area and their work. So I just also wanted to name that.
I like to say that leaders spend most of their time thinking about the future and managers spend most of their time thinking about right now. What are we doing right now? So a good combo of the both is probably what we will try to find out. Any other questions out there?
I see a question from Michael in our Q&A. Michael says, I agree with Susie that we should promote the fact that Bay Area is one of the most diverse theater communities in the world, which is a very unique environment. Will we be searching internationally?
Good question. I'm assuming that our posts, since it's all virtual, can be seen internationally. So I assume we will consider candidates that come from the world. I don't think we have any plans of posting on international platforms, do we?
Yeah, I don't think that we'll be actively recruiting internationally. We wouldn't turn away an international applicant or an applicant from abroad. But I think we're focused mainly on the United States and the Bay Area in particular.
And I think that for this position in particular, that feels, I don't know, like, again, as has been said, we obviously would not turn away applicants or disqualify candidates just because they don't live in the U.S. But there is a particular U.S. There's the way that theater operates in the U.S., which is, I think, very key to this position in a way that it doesn't operate in other countries. And so how we translate the skills that somebody would bring from an international perspective would be really interesting, just in the ways that particularly our government supports and doesn't support the arts in ways that in other countries they really do. So that's something that would be an active question for me as we consider candidates.
Anne is interested in Hong Kong, Mexico, and Tokyo. And if you know folk from there, send them the link once we post it. Friends, we have about 25 minutes more time with you. I want to make sure you are asking all the questions that you think the search team needs to be asked. It's a big, important position to fill in the Theater Bay Area, so we want to make sure we hear from you. Seeing none. Oh, what? Almost did a. Oh, is TBA set up such that whomever takes on this position, they are not overwhelmed? It's a very good question. I think alluding to what Leandro was saying earlier about looking really at taking a critical look at the number of programs TBA is offering and really looking at what TBA can do best now, given how the world has changed. I, for one, believe that missions have to change when the world needs you to do something different. So as we look at our assessment of the work that TBA has been doing, we might recommend some things to them. They might have more conversations about what is it that the world needs them to do right now. And that may determine sort of shifting programs, merging programs, sunsetting some. We don't know. That's for Theater Bay Area to decide. But let's hope that the person coming in is coming into an organization that has asked those questions and has have had those difficult conversations so that they are not overwhelmed when they walk in. I will also tell you that I took on the job as the most senior position in government for arts and culture for the state of Massachusetts, right in the middle of a pandemic. And so I'm not sure it's possible to take on a job in the arts and not walk into a place that's overwhelming. But let's hope that we can guide the organization. And by the time we've gotten to the organizational assessment and the search, hopefully the candidates will understand where the organization is. Hopefully the board and the staff will also understand where the organization is. And so anyone walking in will know what they're walking into.
Yeah, that's one thing that we really value and try to make really clear with organizations or with candidates is like, what's the environment you're walking into so that they can come in with eyes wide open, right? We don't want folks coming in and being surprised by what they find. So we tend to be really open with our candidates about sort of, the assessment that we're doing, what we found in our assessment, so that they can really put their skills to use in the best way possible as quickly as possible. I agree with Michael. It's been described to me most appropriately as when you start a new job, especially in a theater organization, it's like drinking from like 4 fire hoses all pointed directly at you. And I think that even when you pare down programming, it feels that way. And what we will do is make sure that that person has the network of support they need to get through that period, and then stop that feeling of being overwhelmed.
Michael has an agreement. He agrees with me. Michael spelled AEL. We are in a transitional period that is unprecedented. So this candidate must be flexible and be able to use multimedia and multitasking, since physically interfacing right now is a challenge. Thank you, Michael. Anyone else? Critical things, or even things you want to share with us, things you think we should know. There's a new question. Oh, they spelled your name wrong on, on the birth certificate.
Also to say that this won't be the last chance you have to ask questions, or anybody in the community. If there are folks who weren't able to make it here today, but you think, oh, like you have to watch this, you need to hear from ALJP, you need to talk to them. Remember that email address, tbaedsearch at aljpconsulting.com, and we'll also post the recording of this so folks can watch later. And there will be plenty of opportunities to ask us those questions. If you can't think of them right now. So I just don't want anybody to think like, oh my God, this is my last chance. It's not your last chance. We will be monitoring that email actively. So please feel free to reach out.
Just a reminder from Sunshine that TBA will also post this recording at theaterbayarea.org/TBA transition.
Probably get that up sometime tomorrow, just so that Sunshine can go have a little bit of time to herself once we're done here today. She's already working late. Thank you so much, Sunshine, for helping us organize this. This has been awesome. I'll just do one last call for questions before we wrap. We'll wrap a little bit early and let you all get on with your evening over on the West Coast. Last call. Anybody have any last thoughts they want to leave us with? Okay.
Thank you so much, y'all. Thanks so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure, having this time with you.
Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Have a good one. Bye now.
Good night. Thanks so much.